Hi, my name is Guin Thompson. I'm a cartoonist and illustrator and a professor of illustration at Grand Valley State University. And today I'm here to talk to you about how to make a comic. So let's get started. Alright, how to make a comic by me, Guin Thompson, professional nerd. Alright, the first question we need to ask ourselves is, what exactly is a comic? And I can answer that by showing you this. So a comic, or sequential narrative, or graphic novel, or funny book, or whatever you like to call them, they're known by many names and all of them are correct, are made of these three things. So the first are images, the second is words, and the third is time. So images is pretty self-explanatory. Images are pictures. They show us things visually so we can see them. That's how vision works, I think. And these images can really be in any style. They can be as simple as stick figures or as realistic as beautifully rendered or even painted sort of images as well. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is a description of sound, really, how we speak or how things sound in the world, and that's words. So it's a lot like something like film. If you think about that, you see the film and you hear the dialogue and the soundtrack and the sound effects and things like that. And much like a film or something like that, we have our third thing, which is time. So when you're reading a book, time passes, of course, but what you're seeing in a comic book is a description of time. So each panel, each moment or image that you see in a comic book represents a moment in time. And if you string them all together, then you get a complete story. That amount of time can be just, maybe an hour or so, maybe even less. It can be thousands of years, depending on what the story is and how far apart those moments are in time. But those three components are what you need to create comics, which is pretty cool. So how you get to set up those elements, how they come together, is kind of an interesting sort of way. There are certain building blocks in comics that you can use to create the sense of time passing or to contain these moments. So the very first thing to talk about is the panel. So when you look at a page of comics, even a comic strip like in the newspaper or online or something like this, those little boxes that contain the pictures and then contain the words and things like that, those are called panels. And one panel equals one moment in time. So multiple panels equals time passing. So you put those panels in a sequence, you put them in a row. We are going to sort of understand there's a relationship between each panel. What happens in between each panel is called the gutter. So the gutter is that space that tells us that these are separate moments. So it's actually really important to have that space between each panel, between each moment. If you don't have that, everything's going to feel like it's happening super, super, super fast, like one thing right after the other. The gutter, that space, gives us a little chance to take a breath, to breathe, and to contemplate one panel to the next. So that's a pretty important thing. We have these containers for our images, these panels, but we also have words and sound effects and things like that that exist within the panel as well. So there's no images in here. I'm just showing you kind of the building blocks, but imagine whatever kind of imagery you want in these panels. There's a few different ways to describe sound. So the first is a dialogue box. That's that in that first panel there. And if you think about this, imagine that you're watching a movie and you hear a narrator kind of talking over the scene, telling us maybe something from another person's point of view or for information that maybe the characters don't have. That's similar to what a dialogue box does. So it's like a voiceover or it's a narrator or it's this information that we get some other way. So sometimes the images and the dialogue box don't really have that much in common, but together they make sense. in the context of the story. So the second way to describe kind of sound is a word balloon, and these are those bubbles that have the little tails coming off of them. The tails usually point at the character's mouth that's saying the words, so that way you're not confused about who is talking at any one time. So sometimes you'll see these and they'll be spiky or they'll be kind of wavy, and they can sort of match the inflection of whoever's talking. So if you see a word balloon that's really spiky, looks like a porcupine, maybe that person is shouting. If it's all wavy, maybe they're not feeling well, or they're speaking in a very weird way. And when you see a word balloon like the one right below it, that's kind of bubbly looking, that is a thought balloon. So that doesn't represent speech that's said, it's representative of something that someone's thinking internally. So that's kind of cool. So you get a little glimpse into what's happening inside the character's head. And then lastly, what's really fun and what really sets comics apart from just like regular books or from images looking at them all by themselves is the sound effect. So these are things like bam, like an explosion, or if something hits something else. We have a beep, like a little electronic beep, and we have boom, like something exploded in fire. There's all different kinds of what's called a font, which are different ways of just designing the letters to look like different sound effects, which is kind of cool. So that's a really fun thing to play with comics. And it just adds that extra layer onto the experience of the reader, which is fun. So these are your building blocks: gutters, panels, dialogue boxes, word balloons, sound effects. That's really all you need. Anything beyond that, you can make up as you go along. All right, so the first thing when you're making a comic is you have to have a story. So the whole point of making a comic is to tell a story to someone else through the comic. So that story can really be anything. It can be a story about you, it can be a memory, or about your life. It can be silly, it can be funny, it can be sad, it can be literally anything. There are so many kinds of comics out there. There's not just all superheroes. There's a lot of really great stuff for every age as well. Kids all the way on up. So ask your librarian about some recommendations for you, and you'll find something really fun if you need some inspiration. But really, you can tell a story about anything, and that's where you have to start. So it's as easy as maybe telling the story to someone else or writing it down and just figuring out what happens first, then what, and then. And a really good way to kind of understand the moments of your story or what's going to translate into those panels or those visuals is as you're telling your story, every time you say, and then, that means that's a new moment. So, for my example here, I have a Western story. It's very short. This is just one page out of what might be many pages, but just in the interest of time, this is what I have. So I will kind of do a dramatic reading here. Ready? Mustang Sal, our main character, is drinking at the bar with his friend Barry the bartender. And Barry the bartender warns Mustang Sal about his nemesis, Bad Bart, escaping from jail. Sal suddenly gets a sense that something is wrong. Suddenly, the swinging doors to the saloon are kicked open by none other than Bad Bart. The two rivals stand and face each other in a tense moment. It's very exciting. Can you kind of picture that in your head, how that goes down? It happens pretty quickly when I read it. And now we have to figure out how we're going to sort of translate that into visuals. So, a lot of comic writers, or a lot of comics creators, myself included, start with a script. And it looks a lot like a script for a television or a movie show. Or a movie, not a movie show. That makes a lot of sense because it's really visual and we have to sort of describe what's happening in each moment, so we can later go on and draw it. And what's really cool about comics is it's a very collaborative medium, meaning more than one person can work on a story or a project. And in fact, that's really common because comics take a really long time to make. So sometimes you have someone who writes it, and then someone who draws it, and then someone who inks it, and then colors it, and someone else who does the type and the sound effects and all that, and even someone else to lay it out and make it ready to be printed, and then finally you get to read it. So there are a lot of different steps in creating this, and sometimes it's all one person and sometimes it's lots of people. So if you write a script like this, it would be really helpful for somebody who was going to draw it after you if you weren't the one actually drawing it. So I have, really, when I break it down, when I think about that and then rule, I have Mustang Sal drinking in the bar, and then his friend warns him about his nemesis getting out of the pokey, and then he senses something is wrong, and then the doors swing open and there is his nemesis, Bad Bart, and then they face off. So every time I say and then, it's a new panel. So I have 6 moments, and if each panel equals a moment in time, I have 6 panels. So what this script does is it kind of describes what's happening. So these are some terms that I just wanted to kind of throw in here for you that talk a little bit about how those images are going to fit and work in the panels. It's a little more advanced. If you are interested in learning more about this kind of comics creation, there are a few books I would recommend that I will post on my social media. So go give my social media a look and you can find the list there. So I need to go from this script to images. So I have 6 panels divided up, looks like a page. Each panel is just kind of drawn as it was described. So we have him sitting at the bar, the bartender tells him the news, he senses something wrong, there's the door, it's kicked open, there's Bad Bart. Oh no. And it looks pretty good, you know, it's fun to read, it's alright, but it could be better. So the next step would be to kind of look at each image that sits in the panel. They're all kind of from the same viewpoint, meaning they all feel kind of like I'm just standing right next to these guys and kind of seeing what's going on. It's not as exciting as it could be. So let's make it a little more exciting. Yeah. All right, so you have to think of yourself kind of like a director when you're creating a comic. So you have to kind of picture yourself in the scene or how you want to see it, and then draw that accordingly. So you almost act like the camera in a film or in a movie. So you are able to draw things from very high up to very low down, as if you're standing really high up on a ladder or even in an airplane or something, all the way down to like laying on the ground. And you have the ability to draw things from really far away to really close. So you can kind of use that to heighten the emotion in your stories, to make it feel more exciting or more, you know, scary or more comfortable or whatever you're trying to go for. So here in the first panel, if we show the bar from a little bit higher overhead, then we're going to get a better sense of what this place actually looks like. And this is called an establishing shot. So it sort of tells your reader where you are. Okay, we're in this bar. There we go. We can kind of see the bartender behind the bar. We can see Sal sitting there. We kind of understand where we're at. And then the next panel, we get a little closer so we can sort of see the bartender's face. We see Sal looking kind of apprehensive. And then we see the doors, and it's close up. What's going to happen? Suddenly it's kicked open. us getting really close on those doors, and like we're really close to Sal's foot when he kicks it open, or sorry, Bad Bart's foot when he kicks it open, that just makes it feel a little bit more intense. So that's something that's really fun to play with. And even more than that, you can play with the size of your panels too. Not everybody does. Some comics do a really great job with telling a story and having all the panels be the same size. It's very traditional. If you look at like old comics from like the 60s, you'll see that quite a bit. But it's also something you can play with. So if you have like a really important moment and you want to show this is important, like that last panel there, it's really, really big. It tells the viewer or your reader, the audience, that this is a really important moment. So you better pay attention. So the bigger the panel, the more we're going to think it's important, the more time we're going to spend with it as well. So it's up to you how you want to kind of play with that, but really the end result here is just telling a good story. So however you can do that, however you're happiest with it, then you're doing it right. So there's no right or wrong way to tell the story. And then, of course, lastly, you get to add in your words, your dialogue, your sound effects, things like that. So in the first panel, we have our bartender saying, "Another one for you, Sal? Hey, did you hear old Black Bart is out of the pokey? Something ain't right." And then, bam, door gets kicked open. And then we have silence in the bar as everyone stares at Black Bart. It's very intense. I definitely recommend doing dramatic readings of your own stories because they just make it more fun somehow. So that is your building blocks. You've got panels, you've got the space in between those panels, you've got word balloons, you've got sound effects. If you put those all together, you are going to be able to tell some really great stories. So the really wonderful thing about comics is there's no wrong way to do them. You can do them with anything. You don't need special equipment or special materials. All you need is a pencil or a pen and paper, and that's it. So go tell your story and have a good time doing it. Thank you so much. I had a good time talking to you about comics. I hope you did too. So can't wait to see what you come up with. Thank you. Bye.